So, I mean, it just seems like that's a whole huge exam, and of course, you know, exams is where we are at the end of the year.
It's true. Yvonne, KCSE, I think, is tomorrow is the last paper, and most candidates will be finishing the exams tomorrow. But this past week, we've seen sherehe, vigelegele, and of course, we've also seen the other side of it, of students who hadn't done well after the KCPE results were released. How many days after the exam?
18 days.
18 days. So a lot of people are saying, wow, this is the first time we've seen this happening in the history of the country. 18 days after KCPE, we have the results. 1,088,456 students did the KCPE, and the results were all released. Of course, one good thing is we didn't have any cases of exam results cancellation. The government seems to say that the measures they put in place to try and curb cheating actually worked. But now there's a bigger issue of 100% transition, Gashuri. 1,088,456 students were turned up, despite Magoha saying they've put aside 8 billion shillings just to sort of like fix the infrastructure of the schools where the students are supposed to go.
Absolutely, and I would want us to begin by listening to what the Cabinet Secretary was saying during the release of the KCPE results 2019.
In terms of 100% transition, we have assured our children that all of them, and I repeat, all of them, will have a place in the secondary school. The government, under the leadership of His Excellency Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, has given us very firm instructions to ensure a fair, transparent, and very quick placing of these children, to the extent that by the grace of God, tomorrow we shall be on the ground, and by the 2nd of December, every child in this country should be able to know which school the child is going to.
And that's a great thing. I would support 100% transition because, truth be told, a student who has completed class 8 and is proceeding to Form 1, by the end of Form 4, they will have acquired some more knowledge, some more skills. Basically, they will have grown up, so to say, as opposed to letting them drop off at class 8. But that is easier said than done. What now is the main challenge is the infrastructure in these secondary schools, because the last 2 years or so, you've had many secondary school principals complain that the infrastructure that they had could only accommodate so many students. And you also have to make sure that even as these students transit to secondary schools, they have the right environment to study. I mean, they worry about where they're going to sleep, what they're going to eat, where they're going to study. It should be very, very important. And I hope these 8 billion shillings can be channeled to schools as quickly as possible, so that this period of November, December can be used to construct at least some classrooms here and there where these students can be. Also empower the day secondary schools, because this is where a lot of the students are likely to end up. So there's no need of having day secondary schools that have no equipment, that have no infrastructure. Otherwise, it will be generating holding grounds for these students, you know, just for transition purposes.
Right.
There ought to be quality where they are going, so that the 4 years they will be in school will be worth the while.
Right. Let me bring in Joe Ageo now. Joe, if you can hear me, we have about 8,542 secondary schools in the country, from national schools to county schools. But now we have the headache of private versus public schools. In primary schools, in fact, these results that have come out, the schools that performed very well are the private schools. But now the irony is that the best secondary schools that we have in this country are the public ones. So the private school students and their teachers work very hard for their children to go to the public secondary schools like the Alliance, the Mangu, the Nairobi School, the Ladara schools of this world. So why this situation? What happened? What changed? Some will say, oh, FPE, the free primary education, came up with these challenges. Could be one of the reasons why maybe we are seeing this in our public primary school. Or is the government not investing enough in this?
Well, Jamila, the picture you paint is a very sad one, I must say, because one, yes, it is true that many parents right now take their kids to private schools so that they can qualify to join public secondary schools, which happen to be some of the best. I mean, I have an interest in some schools, both parental and communal interest, that is, and I know for a fact that there is a big scramble when it comes to places in national schools, for example, which are obviously public. But it is an indictment, I think, on the government and this society in general to have neglected, public schools, primary schools especially, because what happens is that, we brought FPE, which was a great thing. I mean, every child needs to go to school, but that has to be backed up with the necessary investment to make sure that these children are learning in conditions that would enable them to learn something, that will enable them to pass those exams, which as of now, before CBC comes, if it comes in the way that we've been told, to be ready for the next level of life. So what are we seeing? We are seeing a situation, and this is the height of the irony, we are seeing a situation where these children have been in private schools, where they are probably 20 or 25 children in a class. Then they go to these public schools, and suddenly there are 50 to 60 something in a class. What does that do? It does many things to this child. First of all, they are not used to crowds, basically, in a class. They're used to their own space. Secondly, they're used to personalized attention from the teachers. So if you are a child who probably was average, was not doing that well, and every time there's a teacher who will be saying, oh, I noticed you didn't perform very well in mathematics, what happened? And that teacher will take you through the different topics or sums that you didn't do very well in, and lo and behold, when the exams come, you do very well. But you go to this public school, well, it is a national school, yes, but it is a public school, and so it has many people from all over Kenya, and suddenly you find you're lost in this crowd. So these children who leave private schools many times don't do that well, even if they go to these top schools in the country, because there is no personalized attention, and suddenly they feel lost. There is a culture shock because they see many things that they haven't seen. So you find that some children have had to leave those schools if their parents can afford it, to go to some of the high-cost private secondary schools, which tend to have facilities that might mirror what they had in primary school. So I think the bottom line, most of the people who make decisions in the ministry, in all the places where policy is made, quite frankly, don't have their children in primary school. So much like the hospitals and all the other public institutions, one is tempted to think that maybe there isn't a lot of incentive to do these things. Because finally, Jamila, if you think about it,
yes,
most of these people went to public primary schools.
Yes.
But how many of them can take their children to those primary schools that we have today? That alone should tell you that something is amiss, and we are going to continue paying the price.
Thank you, Joe. And talking about the national schools, I'm sure the students, Yvonne, who got 400 and above, all of them are looking to go to those national schools. During the tenure of President Mwai Kibaki, before that, there were very few national schools. If I talk about Northeastern Province, I think the only one we used to know about was Garbatula High School. And then during President Kibaki's tenure, he upgraded a few county schools to national status, so at least we had a few national schools across the country. Now, Yvonne, you're talking about 100% transition. You're also talking about selection, the selection of schools. It's going on right now, but there's the worry of one not ending up in the school they picked, one, two, maybe go to a school that is the other side of the country, very far away from you, Yvonne.
That's right, and indeed all the students will know by December the 2nd which schools they will be going to. And just what you mentioned about 2018, I remember speaking to somebody in Mombasa, an acquaintance who said his daughter had been sent to a day school in Ukambani. And they live in Mombasa. So there's been a lot of issues, especially with the 100% transition that was done last year. So we're hoping that they're able to learn some of the lessons, because last year was the first time it was being implemented, and there was a lot of interesting things that happened. It wasn't just about infrastructure, it was also about human resource. Last year, the TSC had asked for 12,000 teachers to be hired to deal with this 100% transition. They only got 7,000. The government had said it set aside about 16 billion for infrastructure development. development in about 10,000 schools countrywide. But the situation was quite something. All of these schools were grappling with this 100% transition. In Chavakali School, for example, they had to set up a 7th stream to accommodate the more than 1,900 students. And it was the same in Kaimosi Girls. The classrooms were congested. The same in Kanga Boys. I'm just reading a report here that was done by the Daily Nation at the time, where apparently in St. Paul's Ombo Mixed Secondary School in Uriri, one class had 124 students against the recommended 40 per class.
That's a baraza.
It is, indeed. And some people, in fact, some schools were converting dormitories, dispensaries, anything they could into classrooms. People were still studying outside because the government directive was 100% transition. So the hope is that a lot more has happened across this year.
Yes.
And of course that a lot more will happen between now and January to make this 100% transition something that is a reality, so that the quality of education they receive in secondary school, like you were saying, you know, is just as good.
It's a shared responsibility.
Yeah.
I mean, members of parliament get about 100 million shillings in CDF, and because of clear lines of expenditure, CDF can only do that which is national in nature. Education remains a national government function.
Right.
So at least some money allocated to CDF can be used to construct a few classrooms, expand others, you know, rehabilitate others, and so on and so forth. So we hope that members of parliament can use at least some money in their CDF kitty to help deal with this situation. But you can bet with 100% precision that the next few weeks, once the letters are out and the placement list is clear, the next big stories that we'll be covering are complaints and lamentations by parents and students who will be saying, my son, my daughter got 420 marks but has not been admitted to their school of choice. But you know, some things are also very practical in nature. You can now imagine the number of students who enlisted, let's say, Alliance Boys as their first choice. And they clearly won't, all of them won't get that opportunity.
Yeah.
So there will be a lot of lamentation. So hopefully there will be fairness in terms of how the placement will be done, because every so often you'll hear stories of underhand dealings or some positions were out for sale and so on and so forth. So let's hope that what Professor Magoha was saying, that this process will be fair, equitable and transparent.
For the sake of all the parents and the students, we hope that will be the case. And Yvonne and Gashuri, if all 1 million plus students get places in secondary schools, we'll have 2.9 million students in our secondary schools by January this year. And we need to take a break on that note, and we come back.